Okay, welcome. Thank you all for coming this evening. And it's a great pleasure to welcome you and to be here for this lecture series, which has just really been astounding. I think many of you who have been here for most of these lectures would agree. So tonight, we're very fortunate to have Rick Aldred with us. He's the president and co-founder of Eleanor's project. And that's the title of his talk tonight, which is Eleanor's Project, A Look Behind the Curtain. Rick works half-time as a computer support person at Partnership Health Center in downtown Missoula. The other half of his days are spent working on the two nonprofits that he and his wife, Tamara, who's also here this evening, have founded. Eleanor's Project and Pastoral Care USA. Rick has a BA in philosophy, his BEd is in education, and he's been working on a master's in religious studies. He's Canadian, and he's lived in the United States as a resident alien for over 30 years. I was telling Rick that it's very timely because we were just talking about migrant health in my class. And he enjoys reading, photography, cooking, and working with computers for fun as well. So let's welcome Rick Aldred for his talk.
Thanks. I'd like to welcome you all. On the back table, sort of the one on the right here, there's a bunch of these cards. And they are fundraising cards for Eleanor's project, and I'll explain about that. I assure you that the primary goal of this talk is not fundraising. As a matter of fact, that's one of the things at which Eleanor's project is not very good. Sorry, I didn't have the microphone turned on. Okay, so I'm going to introduce myself in a fairly lengthy manner. First off, notice there's no D after my name. Okay? I'm not an MD. I'm not a PhD or anything like that. Okay, I have 2 bachelor's degrees, most of a master's degree in religious studies, Microsoft certification, stuff like that. So I'm just an ordinary person, right? But I have a number of interests in the world, and one of those is global health. This is the Eleanor's Project logo, and I want to explain to you a little bit about it. If you look closely, you'll see, just a second, where did I put that little, where's this one? Okay, right in the center, okay, so what Eleanor's Project does is wheelchair clinics for kids with disabilities in developing countries. We've worked in Peru and Jordan. So you'll notice that we have kind of this stylized wheel, but in the center is this hand. It's in this shape. I want you all to try to make this shape, and it's important, and I'll tell you why. So, fingers, 2 fingers down, 3 fingers up, thumb and out, okay? This is an American Sign Language sign. It's an abbreviation. I is the letter, that's the letter I in American Sign Language. L, that's the letter L in American Sign Language. And Y, that's the American Sign Language letter Y. So, when you do it like this, it says, I love you. That's at the center of everything that we do for Eleanor's project. It's our motivation, it's our goal. So the story I'm going to tell you is kind of a personal story. Unlike a lot of the other lectures, which have been absolutely brilliant about things like all the kind of different forms diseases will take in vectors and all that kind of stuff. This is a story. This is a love story, really. And it's a very personal story. It's not something that can really fit in those other categories. So, where are we here? To understand Eleanor's project, you've got to understand who Eleanor was, because we named the project after Eleanor. This is a picture taken some years ago of my wife Tamara and my daughter Eleanor signing together. My daughter Eleanor was born in 1989. She was born with a nuchal cord, that is, the cord was wrapped around her neck. And when she was born, she came out white as a crayon, as her sister Julian, who was present at the birth, told us. So her start in life was hard, and the remainder of her life was not easy. She was a wheelchair user all of her life. She had a variety of disabilities. She was deaf. She had a right hemiplegia, which means that the right side of her body did not work well, so she was kind of a lefty in the things that she did. She had intellectual deficiencies that no one could measure because there were no standardized tests that would tell us, or tell anyone, a clinician, at what level she functioned. She could not communicate. For the first 5 years of her life, we had very little idea of what was going on. We would get smiles, we'd get sounds, we'd get gestures, but not what you would expect from a normal 5-year-old. And it wasn't until she was 5 that we finally figured out that she was deaf. If you know anything at all about language development, the first 5 years of life are absolutely critical to the development of language. So we started off at a really severe deficit. As a family, our response to that was to all learn sign language. I happen to be terrible at sign language. I can do vocal languages pretty well. I can speak Spanish enough to get by, French, German, so on. Studied Greek, Latin, and Hebrew as well, but ASL is too spatial visual for me. But Eleanor had a good life. We integrated her into the community in every way that we could. We would take her to church with us. We would take her in races. One of the funnest things I did would be to take her downtown, and somebody that I had no idea who it was would come up to us and say, "Hi, Eleanor. How are you?" I would say, "Hi, I'm her dad." "Who are you?" And often it was a very friendly person, and kids, teachers, other people. So like I said, we took her out everywhere that we could. We'd take her out to cut down Christmas trees. That was always a challenge every year because she had a wheelchair. And this is her kid chair. It was a 3-wheeler. It was designed by a fellow that we knew over in Bozeman, Wayne Hansen. And we got the first kid chair that was ever developed was given to Eleanor. And when we got it, Wayne, the manufacturer, said, "If you break it, I don't care, I'll fix it. You tell me how you broke it. That's all I need to know." Toward the end of her life, in the very last year of her life, Eleanor had a service dog named Max. And if ever a dog had a PhD, it was Max. He was amazing. He did a lot of things to keep Eleanor safe, and he was very clearly her dog. After her demise, Max went gray around the muzzle. It was amazing, just almost overnight. So in 2001, Eleanor passed away toward the end of July. That's a picture taken on our deck. And Eleanor loved to be outside. She liked to see the flowers, see the birds, everything that she could. She was a very visual kid. On 9/11, 2001, while the rest of the world was mourning the Twin Towers and the loss of huge lives, we were planting a tree in Bonner Park in Eleanor's memory. This tree is still there today. You can see it. It's on the west side of the park, down toward the band shell. Look for the little plaque on the ground. It'll have her name on it. As you can imagine, it broke our hearts. Losing a child is one of the hardest things that can happen to you. But our response was to start Eleanor's project. Took us a few years. 2004 was our first year. We went down to Peru. Oh, by the way, if people have questions, go ahead and ask. Okay, happy to do that. So, Eleanor's project, we did that to memorialize her, and everything that we do, we try to honor her. So when we do wheelchairs for kids, we don't care how many we do. We care that each chair is done to the best of our ability as a team. And that ability is very good. We have an extremely good team. This is our mission statement. While Eleanor was alive, our family had a tremendous amount of services. We were given services from different kinds of therapists, from the Child Development Center here in Missoula, from all sorts of places. And our goal with Eleanor's project was to help replicate those services for other people, because in developing countries, a lot of those services just do not exist. So a couple things. First off, we're improving things. It's not perfecting. It's improving, bit by bit. And we've developed over the years. And the second thing is that it's family focused. That's critical. No child with a disability exists without a family into which they've been born. And we found that those families are very cohesive, very strong advocates for their children often, and very capable of learning new things to help their kids. Here's the summary of things that we've done over the past 10 years. We're going into our 11th year now. We've been in Peru for 12 separate wheelchair and adaptive equipment expeditions over the last 10 years. Visited a number of different programs. Been to Jordan 4 times. Jordan, the country right beside Israel. And we did that because we had a connection with our daughter who was in the Peace Corps. She was able to get us connections to get started, and then we kept going. Presented at international conferences, done workshops, many, many, many workshops on wheelchair seating and mobility, provided over 2,000 wheelchairs, so on. You guys can read all this. That's one thing of which I'm particularly proud, is that we've trained 39 graduate students from the College of St. Catherine in St. Paul, Minnesota. These are graduate students in occupational therapy. They come with us to Peru for 2 weeks and learn more about wheelchair seating and positioning in that 2 weeks than most therapists in North America know. In Peru, we do things that you can't do here. For example, we drill holes through wheelchairs. The manufacturer here would just go, ah, you just broke the warranty. So, another thing I'm really proud of too is that we're 100% efficient as a nonprofit 501c3. That means that every donation that we get, 100% of that money goes toward providing services for the children in the wheelchairs. All the overhead, like those cards and different other things, is paid for by grants that we have received for infrastructure development. And we ourselves have given grants to educate therapists in Peru as well. So here's a little geography lesson, as other people have done. Here's Peru, country in South America. This is where we were last year. And close-up map of Peru, there's Lima, the capital, Callao, the port. And there's Cusco. Cusco is, as you might know, the chief city of the Incas. It was the ancient capital for the Incas in Peru and all over South America. Machu Picchu is very, very close, or just I think a little bit north from Cusco. This coming year, 2015, we're going to be in Nazca, which is another town that has very famous, the Nazca lines. You know, those lines in the jungle that form different animal shapes and so on that nobody's able to understand exactly how it got done. Okay, so that's Death by PowerPoint done, thank goodness. Okay. So the question is, how do we make it all happen? There are basically a couple phases. The first phase is preparation. So about 6 months prior to an expedition, this is where people go. These are houses on the hillside in Lima. Lima is an interesting city because like Missoula, it has mountains that come right down to it. But unlike Missoula, Lima has some 10 or 11 million inhabitants. Nobody exactly knows. Some people say 9, some people say 10 or 11. And the reason is that when people come into Lima from the jungle or from the mountains, and because Lima is the capital city and there's lots of industry and presumably lots of money and lots of jobs. Well, a lot of people find out that perhaps is not necessarily so. So what happens when people come to Peru is they look to Lima, is they look for the cheapest place they can live. That often is on a mountainside. And so what happens is, as you can see right here, you have this kind of development in a line up the hill there, and then here, and then down to the bottom. So people start at the bottom of an area, and then the next people come and they move up, and then they move up, and then they move up, and so on. At some point, they reach critical mass when the city of Lima says, oh, you guys probably need services like water, electricity. Let's see what we can do for you. And so they get services like, you know, you can see the power wires running there and stuff like that. So that's how Lima develops. And so there's not a lot of infrastructure there, I guess, to count people and things like that in the same way that one might think. Here's a close-up of those houses. You can see here a social worker and a therapist who are out doing home visits, going to see the children for whom we will eventually bring down wheelchairs. They climb up those mountains and they go into each house and talk to the people and find out. And here's a close-up of a house. You can see that they have the laundry strung outside. You can see that it's built of what appears to be tin, corrugated tin. You know, this one has a window, looks like it's from a van or something maybe, I'm not sure. Even has a door. And you can see the corrugated tin roofs. There's not a lot of rain in Lima. It tends to exist in a desert because the mountains literally come right down to the sea. And so it has the rain shadow on that side of the mountains. And so you have people living in a lot of houses will be made just of cardboard, actually, too. So, and people live there. Okay, so that's about 6 months prior. What they do is they go down and they pick out all the kids that are going to be getting wheelchairs, all the adults. Then they fill out forms for us and send us the forms and tell us what kind of measurements the child has. We have a measurement form so they can measure the appropriate things for a wheelchair, any kinds of diagnoses, medical or whatever, social things, whatever they can tell us, and send us some pictures as well. What happens with those forms is they come into North America, and Tamara and our friend Sammy from New Hampshire go through them and choose out a wheelchair for each kid. And then they put those wheelchairs in a container, and they get sent down. And I tried to find a picture of a guy climbing a mountain of paperwork, but that's the best I could do. In my dreams, I guess, maybe a sex change operation, I'm not sure. But somebody has to put together all the customs paperwork, the documentation and stuff like that. Everything has to be right, so it's persnickety and time-consuming and in Spanish. So that's what I do. So we get all the paperwork together and get it sent down to the appropriate people in Peru. And then 1 week prior, Tamara and Sammy go down to Peru, go to the warehouse of our partner there, Caritas del Peru, and there are boxes and boxes and just all sorts of stuff. And it's all been labeled with a destination, a kid's name, and it gets sorted, and then trucks come and they take things to wherever it's going to go. So you remember when I showed you the map of Peru, you could see that there was Lima and then Cusco was far away. It's about an 8-hour drive. And Nazca is about a 6-hour drive, which is where we're going this year. So they go on trucks. One set of trucks goes to our partners at Yankanawasi. The other set goes to the partner that we're working with, Equip Kids. Another thing that happens in that week before is that Tamara does incredibly good classes for parents and for therapists. And here I think it's mostly therapists, although there seem to be some parents. And we have a translator, Luis, who's really an amazing guy. He's from California, and he's Peruvian in origin, and so he's able to translate all of Tamara's lectures into Spanish so that people there can understand it. And here's the team from Yankanawasi. These are the people that we work with. You can see Luis and Tamara there, and you can other therapists who've come for the workshop that Tamara taught. And we view this as being a very important thing too, because our goal is to work ourselves out of this job. How silly is it for us to take 150 or 200 wheelchairs, I think 200 this time, put them into a container, ship them down to Peru, come down, fit them to the kids, when they have all these trained therapists who could do the same thing if they can develop the infrastructure themselves. So our goal is to train them to take over. And they have the heart to do it, which is really amazing. Another thing that happens in that week before is Tamara will go out with a therapist like this fellow and make home visits, go and see the people in their houses, see how the kids are doing, see what the conditions are actually like. And here's Tamara working, evaluating a little guy on a mat. It's kind of dark on this side, unfortunately, I'm sorry. But this kid is pretty well off because he's on a bed. We met a lot of kids who sleep on the ground. Or they might have like a sheepskin on the ground, and that's their bed. And then there's the expedition. So we have a team of students, therapists, wheelchair technicians, and then other assorted folks like me, and Laura is here too, who go down and work on the expedition every year. What we do is we work first in Lima, typically. Here we have a picture. This is the partner that we work with in Lima. They're called Yankanawasi. That's a, oh my goodness, Quechua expression, and it means house of work. So this is their sacred space in a church, and every year what they do is they push back the benches and create tables with mats on them so therapists can do mat evaluations. And you can see that it's a very busy place, lots of people working, doing things. And what's interesting is that when we first started coming down to Yankanawasi about 7 years ago, a lot of this space was not finished. Initially, it didn't have a roof over it. You can't see the roof here, but it does have it. It didn't have a finished altar like this. On the sides, you can get a hint that there are classrooms and then a second story that goes all the way around. That second story was there when we first started, but it was pretty roughed in. So over the years, we watched this whole place come together and become a much more church-like place. And it's really neat because Yankanawasi is one of our favorite places on earth because they have health clinics there. They have like any need that they see, they work really hard to fill. So they have pharmacy, they have all the doctors there, they have machines to take x-rays for breast cancer, that kind of thing. When they find out that things are needed, it's run by the Holy Cross Fathers, and so they have access to a lot of money in North America. They do everything they can to get it down there. So they do a really good job. I've often thought that if the church in North America worked anywhere close to that, it would be much more attended and much stronger as an institution. And here we have the whole crew from Yankanawasi. There's Sammy that I've been talking about. There's Tamara right there, me wearing my hat, and all sorts of people who've come from all over to work with us. So we have lots of, and then here's just some interesting slides. This is how a lot of the kids come into our clinics. They're riding on the mom's back. You can see the legs sticking out. These are strong women. The hats are cool. See, I have a hat too. This is my hat. I haven't worn it yet because when I put this hat on, I become gringo loco. The crazy gringo. And gringo loco is kind of a fun guy. He can talk to kids, tell them how crazy he is, how crazy they are. Makes me a bit less threatening. It's odd to be kind of this tall white guy in the midst of a sea of shorter brown-skinned people. It scares kids sometimes. So, makes it easier. And this is a picture I particularly wanted to put in. It's not often that you see men so associated with kids with disabilities. And we found that a lot of men come into our clinics. When a family experiences the birth of a child with disabilities, the most common event that occurs is a divorce. The vast majority of kids in North America with disabilities are being raised by single moms. And that's a really hard thing. So any time I see a man, a father with his child with disabilities, I make a special point of going up and talking to them and say, I too was a dad with a kid with disabilities. I know what it's like. It's not easy. But good for you for doing the job that you are. And thank you for doing that. Your child, the whole nation will benefit because of your work. Here we are working on a wheelchair. It's mounted on a makeshift table so people can get at it easily. Here's Sammy doing an eval with a kid. We do an average, our team of 17 does an average of probably 6 or 7 children a day. Sometimes fewer, sometimes more, depends. But as I said at the beginning, our criterion is not numbers. I don't care how many we do. What I care about is that each child gets the absolute best that we can provide. And our best is very good. We had a doctor named Joe Dukowski from northern New York who came down at our invitation, at Tamara's invitation, to work with our students and to work with the people there. Came down for a week while we were in Lima. And his remark at one point was that he felt like the kids going out of our clinics in Peru looked better than the kids coming into his clinic in northern New York. I was really amazed. And really proud, too, because our team does an excellent job. Here are the Peruvian therapists working on seating a little guy. And they are competent to do that all by themselves. And we've trained them. They've learned from us. We've learned from them. It's amazing how ingenious people are in developing countries. They'll take something that you see as having absolutely no use and make something very useful out of it. That ingenuity is born of necessity. I think often that we in North America, because we are so rich, lose a lot in that department simply because we have so much. We don't have to worry about plastic bags because we can just go into the grocery store and get another 100 or whatever we want. Here's Tamara talking to a parent with Luis translating, explaining what's going on with the little person. And here are some of our students unwrapping the wheelchairs. When we send the wheelchairs down, they all get wrapped in plastic so they don't bounce around too bad in the container in which we sent them. This is a group of helpers that were at our last clinic in Lima. These guys are all studying to be priests, and they came to our clinic. Before they left, I told them, I said, you know what? There are lots of kids with disabilities out there. Parents are ashamed of them. They hide them in corners. They don't want other people to know. Your job is to go out and find them, and to love them, and to bring them into the community so they too can be participating and enjoying this good earth. Sister, last year we had a nun come with us, Sister Placida, who was a great, liked to sew. She's kind of I call her the farmer nun because she's at the monastery of St. Gertrude in Cottonwood, Idaho, which is about 4 hours away. And we've gotten to know her over time. She's the kind of nun who goes out and mows the grass with a ride-on tractor. You know, she's got her pickup truck. And she goes and gets stuff. She makes sure everything's working, you know. So. But she also, in the winter, sews clothes. And one of her gifts to us for the past 2 or 3 years has been a box of clothing that she has hand-sewn that we should give out to the children. And we've done that. The students have particularly enjoyed being able to do that. And here's a little guy coming into our clinic. We assign a number to each child as they come in. And you can see that this little fellow is just sitting on his mom's knee. And if you look closely at his head, you can see hydrocephalus. There he is in the wheelchair that we made for him. This is an adapted kid cart that will allow him to allow her to not have to carry him in the first place. Because these little guys start small, but they get bigger, and they weigh a lot. And so he'll be able to take that wheelchair into a lot of different places. And she'll be able to take him with her, be able to integrate him into the community.
So those wheelchairs are designed to go up and down those mountains?
That's a good question.
The hillsides that people were walking on and envisioning trying to push the wheelchair up and down them.
Yeah, that's a very good question, because that's one thing that we're working on, as a matter of fact. You know, a lot of times what happens with our wheelchairs is, because the children that we deal with have such profound needs, the wheelchairs that we give them are built like tanks. And they don't move, and they're not going to collapse, because they need to be strong in order to support the child in the position that will be helpful for them. So often what happens is that the wheelchair is taken up the mountain, put into a house, and essentially stays in the house. Or if the child's going to school, perhaps the wheelchair will be set in a place down at the bottom of the mountain so they can get the child in the wheelchair to school. What we're working on is developing a new kind of device. We're working with a designer in New Zealand who happened to be in Peru one time when we were there, met us, liked what we were doing, and thought that perhaps he could contribute. So in conjunction, Sammy and Tamara, in conjunction with the people at Yankanawasi and different others in Peru, have been working on developing a transitional chair, essentially, that will take a child from their home down to a place where they could catch transportation, like a taxi or a bus, to get to a doctor's appointment or whatever. And this device will be smaller, it will be foldable, and it'll work with the taxis in Peru. I'm a tall person. There's a common taxi in Peru called the Tico. It stands this high. So I have to fold myself into it. And that's the kind of taxi that most people take. In Peru, very few people have their own cars. It's a sign of extreme luxury. So for a lot of the parents that have kids with disabilities, that's totally out of reach. So we are trying to address that. It takes time, but you're right. I mean, those are good sized wheels, but the wheels on the front are small. And so they can't necessarily go up the mountainside with it.
Are you using stainless, I mean, I would imagine that's fairly a heavy, chair is fairly heavy, or are you using like titanium or some light metal?
Well, okay, so what we do is we get refurbished wheelchairs.
Okay.
And most of those are made of steel. Some of them are made of titanium. Some are made of aluminum, but mostly steel. And what we do is we get those refurbished and then we take them down to South America and then we distribute them. Wheelchairs, though, are built to such high standards that one wheelchair can serve 4 kids at least. So in the 10 years that we've been doing this, we know of wheelchairs that have gone through 4 kids. Any other questions? Yes?
I was wondering, obviously a lot of the wheelchairs are set up for children. Are you able to adjust them as the child grows?
Yes. Yes, every wheelchair that we take down is designed, all wheelchairs are designed to grow. And when we choose wheelchairs, we try to choose sort of the smallest size that will, or the largest size that will be shrunk down to fit the child so that there's enough growth. And often children will have 3 or 4 years use out of one wheelchair when they get growth. Every time we hand out a wheelchair, we give people a picture too. And I take down a camera and take a lot of photographs. So each child leaves our clinic with a tag on the back of their wheelchair. One side of the tag is the picture, the other side sort of is a few notes about how to take care of the wheelchair, and then the name and telephone number of the person to contact for getting the wheelchair repaired if they notice a difference between the way the child is sitting in the picture and the way the child is now. Yes?
Financed primarily through donations?
Yes. Yes, we are. And so we run a lean, mean ship. At Staples, you can buy paper for 1 cent a ream, if you know how to do it. I have bought a lot of paper for 1 cent a ream.
Tell us a little bit about the logistics of getting 17 people to be part of your team each year. How do they get away? How do you coordinate all that? Where do you find these people? And so forth.
Well, we've been doing it for 10 years now, and so we have a lot of volunteers who have come back several times. Like Laura, for example, has been, 6 years? 7 years. And we have a team of therapists who have also been multiple times, some of whom have been to Jordan with us as well as to Peru. And we're very, very picky about the therapists that we take. Tamara has a very amazing skill to be able to weed out people. And we say no to a lot of people who apply to come. But, sometimes, for example, there are listservs for wheelchair technicians and therapists and things like that that we utilize to get team members. And a lot of word of mouth.
And I presume that their time is voluntary. Do they pay their own way as well?
Yes. It's completely voluntary. Most people pay their airfare down and back. Living expenses there tend to be rather low. Our hotels cost someplace in the neighborhood of $10 to $15 a night. It's not the Hilton, but it's clean and it's safe and it's good. Food is relatively inexpensive. So it's not once you buy an airline ticket, it's probably another $500 for the 2 weeks, give or take.
How long does everybody stay there?
People stay there for 2 weeks. That's the expedition length. Yes?
Why did you choose Peru?
That's a very good question. In some ways, Peru chose us. It was very interesting. When we started casting around for doing something to memorialize Eleanor, Tamara got a telephone call from a friend in Polson, Montana, who is a special ed teacher. He had just retired and had gone down to Peru to visit some relatives. While he was down there being a special ed teacher, he had looked around to see what's happening in special ed in Peru. Went to a school, met the director of the school, met the kids, really fell in love with them. Came back to Montana, got an email from the director of the school saying, "Don, I need 75 wheelchairs for my kids. Can you help me?" The only person who knew anything about wheelchairs that Don knew was Tamara. So Don called Tamara and said, "Tamara, I have this need for 75 wheelchairs in Peru." And we were like, "Oh, that's very interesting." So that's how we got initially connected. And then things didn't work out so well with that school because they wanted us to come down and do all the work, and they would just sit there and watch. And that was, I'm sorry, that's not how we work. So Tamara, again, sort of serendipitously got an email from a friend referring her to an article that had been written by Dr. Joe Dudkowski talking about Yankanapwasi. And so the next time she read that, and then the next time we went down to Peru, we said, we need to go and see these folks. So we went to see them and said, this is who we are, this is what we do. Are you guys interested? They were. So we worked from there. We do one expedition a year. As Peter said, I work half-time as an IT guy at Partnership Health Center downtown. Tamara, up until just very recently, worked as an occupational therapist, half-time or three-quarter time, full-time sometimes. And so in the last, just actually since January, Tamara has quit her job at Community, and we're working on our nonprofits full-time. I still work half-time at Community, so I have 2 weeks to work with, and so that's what we do, Eleanor's project. I always tell people that's the most selfish thing that I do, because what it does is it fills my heart. Any other questions? Okay. Here's another guy, Antonio, or Anthony, with his dad, finishing the clinic. Here's another little person in a different kind of wheelchair. I'm sorry. This is Anthony coming into the clinic, I'm sorry. And he's just sitting on his dad's, or beside his dad on that bench. And there he is going out of the clinic in a wheelchair. It's pretty amazing to meet people who are 6 or 7 years old who've never been anywhere except that they've been carried by hand. It's even more amazing when you meet somebody that's been 18, 19, even 25 years old, who's only been someplace because their father would carry them there. So that's Eleanor's project. There are cards on the table there. If you'll move to donate, that would be lovely. We really appreciate it. One of the things that I always tell people is that Eleanor's project doesn't have a lot of money, but we have a lot of friends. So if you could help us with the money, that would be great. If not, enjoy.
How much does one wheelchair cost?
Okay, so
You know, if we were to make it, I could
the one wheelchair, typically what we tell people is that it's about $300.
That includes the refit and...
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Like I said, we're really lean and mean. I don't know if you guys have priced a wheelchair on the regular market here at all.
It's more expensive.
Way more. I can show you kids who've got wheelchairs that cost them $40,000. But that's a really specialized motorized wheelchair with the communication system and all sorts of things, you know, tilt and space and electronic controls and stuff like that.
So I take it all of your wheelchairs are, they're not high-tech wheelchairs, they're hand chairs more than
Yes, they're, okay, so they're manual wheelchairs. I wouldn't say that they're not high-tech. because we have wheelchairs that, for example, have the capacity to tilt in space. So if you have someone sitting like this, they can tilt like this, okay? Or they, like that, or back up, or whatever. So the angle tilt is very available. And we choose each wheelchair based on the needs of each child. In Peru, we've tried using power wheelchairs. We've often found that because the curbs are about a foot, you know, between the sidewalk and the road, they're not very practical. The other difficulty is that everything manufactured in North America uses the ASA measurement system. It's not metric, right? The rest of the world is metric, except for us. And so, you know, bearings and things like that can be really hard. Electric motors and things, things wear out, they don't work right, switches break, can't get replaced. I mean, in North America, you can replace these things at the drop of a hat. Down there, you can't. It takes a lot of work.
Are you hit with high import taxes or anything like that? I mean, I worked in Peru, and I know it's impossible to get stuff in. And there's an incredible amount of paperwork for anything.
Yes.
And bribery, too.
I know. It's horrible. As a matter of fact, it was interesting because one time we were down there and we talked to an employee from an American embassy who had been in Peru for 6 months and had got her stuff out of the Peruvian customs or aduanas when she finally relented and said, okay, who do I pay and how much? An American embassy employee, that blew me away. We're fortunate. We have extremely good partners. We work with Caritas del Peru. They have a department in there. It's kind of like Catholic social services kind of for Peru. And so they have a very good relationship with the customs people. We have to work really hard to make sure that all our paperwork is correct and everything is in line and stuff like that. But they have been very successful at getting it for us and getting it through. We have had times, our very first expedition in 2004, for example, we got there with a team of over 15 people. And the wheelchairs were in customs, and people arrived on a Sunday night, Monday morning kind of thing, because all of the planes come in late. And we didn't get to see the wheelchairs until the Friday night of that week, because customs people had them, wouldn't let them out. We thought we could get it done, but obviously we couldn't. So we had one day to distribute those wheelchairs.
So to overcome that, do you ship them more in advance or something?
Yeah, we ship them more in advance. We have a good, our customs consignee, Caritas del Peru, is extremely good. And they're able to bring things in nonprofit. And because they're a church organization and the church is highly respected in Peru and very powerful. And we're able to use that facility to make it work for us.
Get one of the custom guys to come down to your workshop and get them as an advocate in the business.
You're right.
You know, I mean, the thing is, everything down there works on whose palms you grease with dough.
That's entirely often true. Yeah, we've experienced that very much.
And you said you wrote on the back of cars the information about where to get it repaired. So you train local people in wheelchair repair, so
Yes.
that service is available.
So for example, at Yankanawasi, the church that I showed you, they have a biomechanical repair shop, so they have all the tools, and we've given them tons of tools, and nuts and bolts and bearings and everything that they need to be able to fix and repair wheelchairs. One of the exciting things is that this year we're going down to Nazca, which is a new area for us. We've never been there before. And as part of the preparation, we're working with the Lions, our partner there called Equip Kids is working with the Lions Club. And that Lions Club came up and saw our work in Cusco last year. And they were quite impressed, and they wanted to come to their area because they have kids that have those needs. And it's interesting that Lions Club, on their own, set up a padrino, or a godfather kind of relationship, so that every member of the Lions Club has one child with a disability who is their godchild. So when a child has a birthday, the padrino is there. Needs to go to the doctor, can't afford it, padrino is there. And so they work to help the kids. And so we're going down to support that. As part of that, one of the things that we requested was that they set up a repair shop and that they staff it. So we'll go down there this year, and that repair shop is in existence. It's got a person staffing it, and we'll teach them as much as we can in the week that we're there. So we're hoping that we can develop something brand new. The other part of this whole project that I haven't mentioned is the whole aspect of postural care. 24-hour postural care is an approach that has been developed in England and Northern Europe, has not made its way across the ocean to North America for various reasons. And we're just starting to make it more known here. We've used it very successfully in Peru. What it does is, when you sit a child in a wheelchair, one of the things that you do is put padding in, tilt the seat, do all these modifications to make the child as comfortable as possible. When the child gets out of the wheelchair, they get put into a bed. What happens in bed? Splat. They just kind of go everywhere. The approach of postural care is to use that time that a child is in bed to have supports for their body so that the body can maintain a shape that is going to be healthful for them over the long term and change things. We've had great success with it, and it's the advantages of it are, number one, that it's cheap. You can use rolled up towels, you can use pillows, you can use rolled up blankets, you can use whatever you have. And we show people how to do that. Every person who comes into an Eleanor's Project clinic leaves with a postural care plan for their child. The thing that it depends on most is a parent or a caregiver who's going to be there every night to make sure that the child is in that position and using the things correctly. And parents have a lot of time. Don't have a lot of money, but they've got a lot of time. And they can give that time to make the life of their child or their loved one better in that way. Yes?
Are there community, like when you go into a community like NASA, where you're going now, is in addition to the parents, is there some individual, like a social worker, healthcare worker, who maintains contact with these people, the clients, and helps them with whatever further education or needs they might have?
That's a loaded question, because I honestly don't know. I mean, sometimes there are, like, for example, at Yankanawasi, where we work in Lima, they have an extremely well-developed wraparound system. They do very good wraparound care. When we were working in Cusco, it was a little more spotty. Nazca, we honestly don't know, having not been there. But the project that we're working with there in Nazca is called Equip Kids, and they do a lot of work with speech and language development for kids with disabilities. And so they will provide some of that kind of input. But as far as the other, who knows? There's just not a lot of money in the Peruvian budget for that.
Well, I think you're all as moved by this presentation as I am, and the great work that Rick and Tamara are doing there, and Laura, is it? And Laura as well. So let's give them a really rousing send-off. So next week, we're going to have a presentation by Dr. John Miller, and his topic is local global health, helping the underserved in our communities. So I think we're going to bring this discussion of global public health closer to home next week. So see you all next week.